Thank you all for joining us. We're so glad you're here. Bo Moran and Mark Simonson are going to have a wonderful conversation about the newest design from Mark Simonson Studio, Etna. So we're really excited. Thank you both. And thanks everybody for being here.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. I was fortunate enough to meet Mark indirectly through his amazing partner, Pat Thompson, who hired me back in 1993 at the University of Minnesota to teach typography. And through various collaborations and by being a member of Minnesota Public Radio, I would see these fantastic catalogs come in the mail for all this amazing merchandise, and the titling on these cassette tapes, which tells you how long ago this was. These beautiful graphics and beautiful lettering that was on these things. And there was a real cachet to what Minnesota Public Radio meant to the public media world. They were looked to as a leader, and they hired our amazing guest today, Mark Simonson, and he worked for them and for Rivertown Trading. Is that right, Mark? Was it a transition from NPR?
Yeah, Rivertown Trading was a kind of spin-off of Minnesota Public Radio. They originally, it wasn't just people in the basement at Minnesota Public Radio, and it started getting so big that they spun it off into a separate company that it was a for-profit that basically raised money for the network.
Yeah, and they did quite well at that, as I recall. So fast forward to 2003 when TypeCon was held here in the Twin Cities, and I got to re-meet Mark then on the rooftop of my studio in downtown St. Paul. Mark and I are talking to you from downtown, or from St. Paul. Mark is 2 blocks from where I am right now, and I'm 2 blocks from where he is right now, coincidentally. So we're representing Minnesota here today, and very happy to have Mark joining us. We have not only been able to collaborate on letterpress projects, but also Mark was the genius behind the Kana font as part of our Woodtype Legacy project. We had a chance to work not only on the font itself, but it was great for me to be able to then have the Kana font cut in Woodtype so that we could do experiments, which then helped Mark inform his designs in terms of how that font scaled up and down. And that was a really fun way, and I was just thrilled that Mark was so passionate about making sure that letterpress was part of the design process. And so that was a great project too, and it's turned out to be a really successful font, both digitally and analog. So we're grateful for Mark's creative work there. I think it was probably a year and a half ago, Mark first showed me the designs for Etna, and I am going to just share my screen and let you all see the beautiful mini site that he developed with Nick Sherman. And
it was mostly Nick.
Oh, take credit, it's your beautiful work.
I did the font.
Well, yeah, I understand.
He couldn't have done it without that.
That's true. That's true. To help. The font definitely is a showcase piece here. One of the things I'll say about my admiration for Mark's design is typographic color. As we look at what's on screen right now, one of the things that for me is personally important as a designer is looking at the way the white space comes through these fonts and the memorability of these characters. And we talk about revivals, and there are many different kinds of revivals, but Mark, this seems like it had to have been some pretty, to use your words, reverse engineering, right? You had base material, but you also had to fill in a lot of blanks. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, the Etna style, I mean, the name is from the Rob Roy Kelly book, but I guess that's what they called it back then. It's spelled A-E at T-N-A. And it was this kind of really interesting style that I remember first noticing on US currency. It's still on US currency as an engraving style, very similar to the old wood type, but I think they come from around the same period, the 1880s. And the Etna wood type was, I think, originated at Page. and but was only available in large, like probably 12 line, you know, very large sizes with mostly bold styles. You can see, I think in the examples that Bill's sharing here, there's some condensed ones that are kind of not quite as bold, but generally it was a fairly bold style, and pretty wonky as far as that goes. It's very, very idiosyncratic, but I felt it had a lot of really interesting ideas in it that would lend themselves to a, like, quote unquote normal font that could be used for general typesetting uses, rather than just trying to evoke the 1880s wood type era.
There were some standardizations that you employed. Let me go to features. You've got some really amazing ligatures here.
Yeah, I think if you go to the
Go ahead.
design page,
Yep. Uh-huh.
there's more. You can see here. You can see the like the first time I saw it was on U.S. currency. You can see that in the first image there, on a, I don't remember which bill this is, but you can see the really deep serifs on the E and the T, kind of triangular with a slight curve to them. The very highly bracketed serifs on the side that basically meet in the middle. The brackets are so deep that there's not even a straight line on the left side of the eye or the right side of the eye. Things like that really struck my I found really striking and unusual. And when I saw, when I got a hold of the Robert Kelly book sometime later, I realized this was the same style more or less. And so if you want to, let's see, scroll a little bit more. Yeah, here you can see the wood type version, which is not exactly the same, but a lot of the same ideas are in it. There's an example from, I think, the early 70s of a design by Herb Llewellyn that used a condensed version of the style there.
Hey, Mark, we should let you, do you want to drive the car? Why don't I stop sharing and let you walk through your design decisions about this? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Let me see. I'm going to have to find that page on my website. Hold on a second.
Sorry to put you, I could have finished my mini tour and let you have some time to figure out where you are.
It's no big deal.
Good.
It's no big deal. Let's see. Okay, the mini site. All right, let me share my screen here. Okay, can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So yeah. Now the thing with the design is it has these very, very bracketed serifs that, like I said, goes the top of the bracket it meets in the middle there. So it's almost like it's like the serifs kind of blend into the vertical strokes. But then you also have these very angular things like the bottom of the L here, where there's no bracket at all. It's just a corner. And I like this. I really like this contrast between these two elements of the characters, where you've got, very curved, kind of with a lot of tension in them, and then these kind of squared off angles in other parts. So you get kind of a big, deep curve on the top side, inside of the L, but then a straight on the bottom. And I thought that made a really interesting graphical look, that I hadn't really seen in any other type styles. The other thing about the original Etna wood type is how bizarre it is in some ways. If you look at like the very, very long serifs in some versions of it, so you end up with a really big gap between letters, And you can especially see it on the lowercase where, like if I zoom in here, that the inside of the H is actually smaller. The lowercase h is, like the serifs are actually shorter on the inside than on the outside, which is not very good for type color. And if you want to like set text in it or something like that. And then you also get these very bizarre crossbars on the F and the T, which I think are interesting for a display face. But I felt that that was kind of needed to be changed. And, you know, I like these foxtail curves on the, like the top of the F here.
Mark, excuse the interruption.
yeah,
We're still
sure.
on the homepage for the.
Oh, we are? You're not seeing what
yeah.
I'm seeing?
At the when you shared your screen, it took us to the homepage, but I wonder if we are.
I thought you were seeing what I was seeing.
We're all looking at the mini site homepage.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, is this better?
At the moment, we're still looking at it.
Wait, here, is this better?
Not yet. Still looking at the homepage for the mini site.
You might have to stop sharing and reshare and share your whole desktop so you can go between different programs.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, stop sharing. Okay, are you seeing it now? I'm scrolling up and down. Are you seeing that?
It says double click to enter full screen mode. That's on my screen. So
I wish I could see what you guys are seeing.
No worries. Do you want me to take us back there and you can walk me through it?
This is really weird. What are you seeing now?
Me personally, it says it's a black screen that says Mark Simonson has. Oh, there we go. Now we're there. We're in.
This is design of Etna at the top.
Yep, we're looking at it. Yep.
All right. So here's the currency where you can see these very highly bracketed serifs and the sharp inside corners of like the E and the T and these big triangular arms on these. This is from Robert Kelly. This is the Etna wood type. And you can see very similar characteristics. It's a little bit different. And my font is based mostly on the wood type, although there's some elements of, I think, this look in it as well. But so you can see here the contrast between these very deep brackets on the serifs and these inside corners that are just corners and not bracketed at all, just geometric sharp corners. And then this is the where I was showing before. Let me see if I can zoom in. Whoops. Yeah, that's not gonna. Oh, man, what's going on here? Trying to. There we go. These strange F and T here with the brackets on both the top and the bottom. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt things like that needed to be, they might work okay for a display font that, that you want something that's, fairly decorative or unusual. But for things like text and just general usage, I thought these things needed to be kind of reined back. So these are some of the characters you can see here that I've kind of maybe tamed a bit using more conventional forms. So these long serifs on the outsides of the H and stuff like that, especially in the bolder weights, are much shorter. Let's see the original wood type here. And here's some examples of the existing wood type condensed characters. And so I wanted to have a range of condensed styles with the family. And so one of the things I had to come up with is, since it was mostly bold in the original wood type and everything, I had to come up with, I wanted to do a whole range of styles, including, going from light to black. So I had to kind of reverse engineer the whole look of it. And you can see here with the E how I accomplished that, where the contrast is still relatively, it's not real high contrast. You still get the very deep brackets on the serifs, but it's kind of like it just loses some, it just becomes more and more thin, and but retaining the same general look. And I also had to come up with an italic for it, which is something that never existed in the original Etna style. And I used for my basis on this more or less Century School Book and maybe Clearface. Basically, I was trying to imagine, and this is sort of where the reverse engineering thing that Bill mentioned comes in, where I was trying to imagine what American type founders would have done with this style had they done a metal typeface back in the early 20th century based on this style, as they did with, the Century families and, Bookman and, Cheltenham and Clearface, things like that, which were all kind of art directed, I guess, by Morris Fuller Benton, who was one of my heroes. And so I tried to imagine, like, what would he have done with this Etna style? Because there's examples of faces that he did back then that were based on older forms from the 19th century. And so I was just, trying to give it some of that look, I guess. So there's a lot of, I tried to inject some DNA from the Century family into this, since I felt it was appropriate for something that was kind of contemporaneous with Century, but not made into a metal typeface. I thought that was an appropriate strategy. So there are differences, though. Like, you can see, like, the tops of the lowercase letters are flat rather than slightly tilted. The tails on the serifs at the bottom are a little bit shorter. But the overall construction of, like, using the cursive forms for the italic, those carry over. I could have maybe done a slanted Roman as with Bookman, but I felt that cursive forms are more appropriate and would work better. So then they also did all the condensed styles, and I went even further into, since there's a wider range of weights here, it was a lot of fun to get all those. So I think there's 3 different condensed weights. So there's condensed, X condensed, and XX condensed. And the double X's and the X are taken right from Rob Kelly from his book. That's how they used to designate those, is with 1 or more X's for the more condensed it was. So that's kind of a nod to Kelly.
Was it difficult finding lowercase examples, Mark? So many printers often just would order these things in uppercase. Did you find plenty of lowercase source material?
There wasn't that much, but I didn't really need much to go from, as long as I had the full alphabet. They didn't vary that much in the different versions of Etna. Sometimes they did not have the foxtail terminals. And what I mean by foxtail terminals is, you can see on the lowercase a there how it's kind of like a little ponytail or something, or a foxtail, I guess. Normally on, the style from back then, it would be a ball terminal, which is what you see in phases like Century and Bodoni and stuff like that. And that's actually one of the things I liked most about it. But you do see versions of Etna where they have ball terminals. But I thought that wouldn't be as interesting to carry over.
As you got into text applications, if you would scroll down again to just this paragraph that you have here,
Sure.
the condensed styles are meant for display use. Was that, and the way that you standardized the figures, simplifying them, did your goal of having this be a successful display font, was that a significant limitation for you aesthetically?
No, it's just, I mean, the way I think about the condensed ones, I mean, I would think of the condensed styles as being primarily for display because, I mean, you could use maybe the least condensed style here, the middle one here. You could use that for text, I think, if it wasn't too small.
Mhm.
But as you get into more and more condensed here, I mean, the way I think of them is that they're meant to be used taller and taller as they get more condensed. They're not getting narrower, they're getting taller. So that implies larger size. That's why I have them displayed like this here, because, you know, I don't know. I also didn't do italic for the condensed styles. Partly because it would still be in the works if I had. I would never get it released. It already took me an extra year because I originally didn't have the condensed styles and decided to add them about a year or so ago.
Yeah, it's an incredibly ambitious project. Let's see. We had spoken about dingbats a little bit, and you had said Nick had suggested, Nick Sherman had suggested that you incorporate those. Was that a straight nod to Foundry type or just?
You know, he was working on the mini site, and he was like, said, do you ever think about adding some dingbats to this? Because he likes using dingbats. And he particularly asked for these manicules, which are the pointing hands and the arrows. But I also put in a bunch of stars and asterisks and things like that. And I'd never really I'd done like geometric shapes in some of my fonts in the past, you know, like boxes and circles and triangles and things like that. But never really did a lot with, you know, kind of more decorative dingbats. And never had done the manicules. And it was really interesting to do one of those because I figured, well, there's lots of examples of manicules in other fonts, and you know, I pulled out my copy of this. I forget what it's called. Here, I can get the book. I'll show you what it is. Trying to find Robert Kelly. Okay, sorry about that. So this book, which I've had since about 1990 or something like that, and you can see right here, you know, it's got pointing hands in it. So I thought there would be lots of good examples of indicators and stuff like that in here. But most of them were kind of disappointing. You know, I found you know, here's a whole spread. It's nothing but, can you guys see this, or am I still sharing my screen?
You're sharing your screen, but it works for reference.
So you can see what I'm holding up?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Okay. And none of them, they all were kind of weird to me. And then I found one in Rob Roy Kelly, which, let me see, where is that book?
I can go grab my copy.
I rearranged all my type books. And,
Not by color, I
now
hope.
I'm lost. Let me see here. Oh, I see it. Hold on.
And Bill, there was a question about the ampersand in the new Etna. So
It's just to prove that that's not just a Zoom background behind me. Okay, so I found this particular one here. Okay, which is a very detailed engraving. But I made a simplified, I decided to do a simplified version of that for Etna. And it was really a lot of fun. I originally wanted to be an illustrator when I was starting out of college. And so I do have some drawing abilities and things like that. So anyway, this was a lot of fun to do this sort of simplified version of it here. And then I did they're usually available in both white and black. So I, instead of just inverting it as like a shadow kind of thing, I made it look more like, possibly a black person's hand or something like that.
Nice.
Which is unusual.
Somebody asked about ampersands. Can you take us to an ampersand? And was that a
Yeah, let me see
using
here.
character?
Actually, yeah, the ampersand was a lot of fun. Let me see here. Oh, I find one of those. I guess there's in the, wait a second here. All right. So, well, here you can see it. There's two different ampersands here. Can you see this?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Okay. So this is the basic ampersand. It has this sort of back curling foxtail coming out of it. And then, but there's also, I did a alternate ampersand, which is basically the italic ampersand. You can choose between both of these for either the Roman or italic. The default Roman ampersand is this one, and the default italic ampersand is this one, which is a little bit like a Bookman italic ampersand. But you can choose an italic version of the other one too if you want something a little bit plainer. There's also some.
Sorry, keep going.
No, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead and zoom back in on that ampersand, or while you were zoomed back in on that, I'm looking at the text version of it that we're looking right above the word offering in particular. And then if you would scroll out your screen, actually, before you do that, one of the things that is so memorable is there's a lot of joy here, and the bracketing in particular is what makes this so nuancy and fun. And as you said at the beginning, it's that combination of these straight terminals, these straight brackets on the caps in the word alternates, and then you look at the word offering. That we're seeing it here at a scale. Now, go ahead and zoom out for a moment, Mark, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of, as I look at this and enjoy it at a smaller screen size. The smaller version is not burdened by the beauty of the drawings involved. So kudos on that. We have a question about, do you do drawings at all, or was this done entirely digitally?
Yeah, it actually was done almost entirely digitally, which surprised me because when we were doing the mini site, Nick was asking if I had some drawings that I could put in the design section, and I was like, I guess I probably have some, and I couldn't find any. And it's sort of a testament to the fact that I've become so used to working on a computer screen that I can draw as well in a font editing program as I can on paper in terms of like getting it to look the way I want it to look. Even though it's completely different, I sort of it occurred to me at some point that, you're not, when I'm working in a font editor, I'm not really drawing at all. I'm really sculpting, because it's like doing wire sculpture, because you sort of like plot points, and then you have to adjust the curve. So it's like doing wire art or something like that, where
Right.
you're not laying down a line with a pencil or a brush or anything like that. You're really manipulating shapes that are almost like physical shapes, like something made out of wires or something.
Are you working in glyphs to do
Yeah,
your
yeah, I'm
typical
using
fonts? Okay,
glyphs.
great.
This was done mostly in glyphs. I think some very early versions were in other font editors, but
Yeah. I do want to point out, as somebody who's had a chance to see your historic work, you were kind enough to come and present to my students in years past. You do have drawings that go back to junior high, right? I mean, you have lettering.
right.
I mean, you are
Yeah.
like incredibly meticulous about your old notebooks. And
Right.
so
I'm kind
while,
of a pack rat.
yeah, well, I wouldn't use that word. That's really,
I'm organized though, so that's okay.
yeah, incredibly organized. But I think what I enjoy about seeing your process work, because your process is long, your process goes back decades, and that's what's so cool about it. It's not that you're not drawing for inspiration, it's that a lot of the drawing's been done, and that now you're evolving it. So
Right.
that's a personal observation.
Yeah, I think the fact that I can do it as well as I can with, glyphs or whatever, is because I have this longer history of being able to draw the shapes on paper as a foundation for that. But
Right.
I do have I did find it before we started here. I found a drawing that I did around 1981.
Oh,
Can
nice.
you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is from 1981, and this is when I was already I hadn't published any typefaces at this point, but I was kind of a wannabe type designer, working at a magazine back then. Doing what I often did during meetings, which was doodle. So this is like I'm supposed to be maybe taking notes at the meeting or whatever it is, but this is what I'm doing instead. So this is like from a yellow legal tablet. And this is sort of from looking at the one thing was the Heath candy bar logo. But the other thing that it was kind of going into this was the engraved lettering on US currency. And you can see that especially in those really heavy weight letters on most of the page. The lowercase a is not very good, but I wasn't that experienced at drawing fonts at that time. But this is when I first noticed this style, and this is this Etna face is really I can trace it back to this drawing.
Nice.
Back in 1980, as something that had always been in the back of my mind as something I wanted to try to do in some way.
Nice.
But it's not exactly the same. This face is something, or this actually ended up going in a different direction. At the time, I spent quite a bit of time in the early 80s working on this idea, and this has not become. I haven't done this as a type family. Let's see. Well, anyway, it's
I have questions about all
yet
of
to be
those
done,
drawings you
but
just showed. Yeah.
yeah, I wonder.
Nice.
Let's see. Oh yeah, here you can see like what that would have looked like. And this is actually something that I'm sort of still interested in doing at some point. But a lot of the DNA of this ended up in Etna. The flat tops on the lowercase. Some of the other things. It doesn't have the foxtail terminals. It has more like Jensen-like terminals. But
There's a little Benuet influence here too, it feels like.
yeah, it could be.
Just the word actual and cure, and I don't know. It's always funny, you watching.
I can't see those because the screen's being blocked by the thumbnails here. Let me see.
No worries. I thought that this this
we
response
go.
to the title sequence in Stranger Things being done in Benguet. You know, all of a sudden
Oh,
there's
sure.
this
Yeah, I was
embrace
definitely
of
influenced
Ed.
by him.
Right. I mean, it's hard not to be between him. Yeah, there's a lot of amazing work that came out of the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
Let's see. Some folks are asking about your choice of glyphs. Is that what you feel industry standard right now in terms of font software?
Glyphs, yeah. I really like it. I did I originally worked in Fontographer back like in the late 80s and 90s, and all of my earliest typeface releases were done in Fontographer back in the PostScript font days. But then they stopped updating it in 1996, and by the mid 2000s you couldn't really use it to do modern fonts anymore, and I switched to FontLab. FontLab was really not ideal, but it was all there was really that you could use to make OpenType fonts. And it was I got pretty good at it, but then in the late 2000s, it was falling further and further behind in terms of keeping up with the latest developments and the latest operating systems. And they were promising some big new version that was never was constantly delayed. And in the meantime, RoboFont and glyphs were introduced like around 2010 or 2010, 2009 to 2010, something like that. And I tried RoboFont first because it was more because I liked the people who were behind it. And I admired them a lot. It's a lot of the Dutch type designers. But after using it or trying to use it for a couple of years, I realized that it was not really very suited for the way I think. And I finally I was going to try either glyphs or RoboFont, and I chose RoboFont and just stuck with it. And I hadn't tried glyphs, but when I tried glyphs, for reasons I won't really get into it, I realized, oh my God, this is really cool and much simpler and a much simpler workflow, and worked well with Dropbox and things like that that I used a lot. And it's my favorite font editor of all time. It's really just like having a big sheet of illustration board on my drawing board and drawing on it. That's how it feels to me. Whereas all the other font editors feel kind of primitive and like they were based on ideas from the 80s or something.
Mark, do you have an in-use application of one of your fonts that is your favorite, that where it was used by someone and you thought,
Oh
ooh,
man,
that's a great application?
Boy, I've got lots of in-use examples, but I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind that jumps out.
I do like the Coquette Restaurant one. That one's pretty
Oh,
good.
that was pretty funny. Yeah. Yeah. I can actually show that here. Let's see. Font sightings. Here we go. Oops. Oh yeah, here it is. Hold on a second. Yeah, can you see that?
So did you figure, yes, we can. Did you
This is
figure out
in
go ahead.
New Orleans. I was at TypeCon in New Orleans and walking down the street with some other type designers and just happened to see this. I said, oh my God, that's like the typeface is the same as the name of the bar. And John Donner was with us, and he went inside and he got us a table.
Nice. Did you talk to them about their letter spacing at all?
No, that was, it's
After the fact.
ideal, but
Oh, that's great. I love it.
yeah, here they even did a chalk version of it here.
Nice. Speaking of usage, Mark, you and I have had a lot of conversations over the years about licensing your fonts and
Sure.
limitations or lack of limitations. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy in terms of what's okay to use your font for and what's not okay, and how you may differ from other people in the industry?
Yeah, my basic attitude, and this is probably comes from the fact that I was on the other side of the transaction. I was a type user, not a type creator, for so long for much of my career. Is that I think of fonts as a tool that you're using to create things. It's not a piece of artwork. It's not it's art. It's not art. It's art materials, uh, and so I guess I don't really care how somebody uses one of my fonts. And the biggest thing that I care about in my font license is distribution. So like if you buy a 5-user license, you can't give it to more than 5 people who are working with you or whatever, and
Right.
or share it with your friends or anything like that, that they would need to get their own licenses. So all I really care about is like copies of the font and how they're shared. In terms of how you actually use it, like using it for a logo or for a title in a movie or an ad campaign or on a t-shirt or whatever, I don't care about any of that. That's all fair game as far as I'm concerned, and doesn't
Right.
require a special license. And
Mhm.
unlike some people where they try to treat fonts as if they're like stock artwork or something like that,
Right.
or stock photography,
Right.
and have special licenses for certain kinds of uses and things like that. But I want to make it as easy as possible for people to use it, and also make it so that there's not any sort of landmines in the license that kind of gotcha things that will
Right.
trip them up. And I want to be sort of user friendly.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of the licensing.
I like the way you worded it once. You said it's good advertising to allow the more the merrier, right?
No, really. I mean, one of the things that I see sometimes is this idea that, like if a font is used for like a big ad campaign, it should cost more for the license. And,
Right.
to me, that doesn't make any sense, because in fact, I would charge people more if they didn't use the font, like if it was never used anywhere where someone could see it in use. I would actually want to charge more for that rather than a very high profile use where other designers are going to see the font and also want to use it. Because I do think that's a good way that's how fonts become popular, is because you see other designers using them.
When I look at your site and I look at the where to find it, I see that you've got a nice handful of great distributors. Did you intentionally get out of the distribution business yourself? What's your thought?
I originally I did do, you could buy them directly from my website back in the early 2000s. And I was getting about 1/3 of my income from that at the time. But then the company I was using, Digital River, I think that's what it was. No, it was called Digibuy, which was owned by Digital River. They decided to sell it off to a company that specialized in shareware. And it meant like completely redoing my shopping cart back end on my site.
Right.
And at the time I was thinking, I'm not sure this is all it's cracked. I'm not sure this is worth building my own shopping cart and everything, because having to like sell directly to people, I was having to do a lot of support, like people who are having trouble installing fonts or whatever, or they bought the fonts and couldn't figure out where they went on their computer. And or I would get calls and 5 o'clock in the morning from London or whatever. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to like see about only working with third parties for a while and see how that goes.
Right.
And so that I haven't, I haven't tried to sell them directly myself since then.
Cool.
Because it was
Cool.
fine. And,
It's not a trivial amount of work.
yeah.
Is there anything else you want to show us on the mini site in terms of fun facts, or we can open up the floor to questions that folks might have?
One thing I wanted to acknowledge is that David Shields wrote the history section, which is pretty cool. I was really happy that he agreed to do that. He did get paid. He didn't do it for free, but he goes into way more detail than I would have done, because he's, that's David. But
Right.
he's a
Any
scholar.
thoughts about ornament in the style of what's being shown on these pages? If you hadn't, scroll down a little bit. There were a couple that had ornaments on the interiors or even lines.
Yeah, there's some really cool like chromatic versions of Etna.
Yeah.
And you can get those. I mean, Hamilton, through P22 sells some of those styles.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think they'd be great to pair them with my Etna for text or whatever. They would go together.
Yeah. It's just so fantastic to see this come to fruition. I think it was a year and a half ago that I saw this for the first time and was just blown away by the work that's gone in and the way you treated the figures, the way you're treating a variety of things. It's just really great.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, we can open it up to the floor. Mark, you can go ahead and stop sharing, and if anybody else has open-ended questions, we can let folks ask what they might be curious about.
That was great. I do want to say real quick, I absolutely love the idea of type design as sculpting and wire sculpting. I thought that was a really beautiful thought. So.
Yeah, that was something that took me the longest time to get used to when I was first like trying to draw letters on a computer screen, and the problem was trying to think of it as drawing and not as what it was.
Cool. Somebody did ask about Mark, would you have a problem with your fonts being used for a cause or a product that you don't personally disagree with?
It's happened, but I don't want to say for what or anything like that. But I'm very like that's out of my hands, and I couldn't control it anyway. So like people put clauses in their licenses for things like that, but I don't know how you would enforce it.
No, there's no way.
It doesn't make me happy to see things like that, but I also feel like it'd be sort of pointless to try to police it.
Right. Mm-hmm. I know that Morris Fuller Benton is a big influence of yours. Are there books in particular that you look to that show Benton's work? Is it early ATF catalogs, or in particular, I'm looking at I have seen this book collection in person, and it's always like gravitational pull. But are there books by Benton or others that you recommend that folks get their hands on?
Well, there's the book, The Bentons, which came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Forget who. Do you want me to grab it?
Yeah, great.
Perusing of fellow designers' bookshelves should just be a ham hang in itself.
Bookshelf tour. Why not?
Yeah, like Stephen Cole's at work, right?
That rascal.
And it's always a mistake to rearrange your books. So here it is.
Oh, nice. Patricia Cost.
Yeah, Patricia Cost. It was a really great, like very complete history of the Morris Fuller Benton and his father, Boyd or
Nice.
Lloyd. Was it?
Lloyd Benton, yeah.
Yeah, Lloyd Benton.
Nice.
And goes into all this stuff about their all the faces that Benton designed and stuff like that. But for me, the thing that just looking at the typefaces is really, 90% of it, and studying them, like Franklin Gothic, Century Old Style. It just floors me to look at that stuff. News Gothic.
I have to ask a gossipy question, and that is, are there fonts that other people think are fantastic that you really don't like?
Yeah.
And is that something you feel comfortable sharing?
I
The group?
hope I don't make any enemies here, but I was very influenced by Herman Zapf when I was first becoming like kind of thinking about doing type design, and especially when he was releasing stuff through ITC in the 70s.
Mhm.
And but I actually don't like using his fonts very much, like Optima and stuff like that. They seem like they have so much personality that they overpower the design, and they don't mix well with other type families.
Mhm.
It's almost like you just have to exclusively use Zapf fonts together. And they had this kind of calligraphic feel to them that I'm not particularly fond of, I guess, for most the way I would use type as a graphic designer. It would depend on the what it was for, but I find that sort of that they're too pretty, in that they kind of upstage the design and are I guess I kind of like fonts that are typefaces that are more.
Oh, they didn't work?
Oops, somebody's. Jason, you're taking over the screen. Okay.
We got him.
I like fonts that don't try to take the driver's seat, that are strong, but I'm having trouble coming up with the word for it, but that serve the design rather than the design serving them, kind of. So
And another question I have,
that's what I like about Benton's fonts. Is that
yeah, right.
they
Have
just
you
sort of slip in and do their job.
right? Have you? Can you talk about a few of your heroes that you've met over the years?
One is Jim Parkinson, I think,
Of course.
who is an early inspiration to me to do type design, because he had done a custom typeface for Rolling Stone magazine back in the 70s. And he was working with Roger Black at the time.
Right.
He's also one of my design heroes, like back when I was a magazine art director, especially.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, getting involved in TypeCon and stuff like that, I've met a lot of people who are kind of heroes to me. Herb Ballin, I never met him though. I mean, because he died back in around 1980 or 81 or something like that. But
right.
He was a big influence on me. And Matthew Carter, whose work is just exemplary. It's like he's on some other level, And Ken Barber at House,
right.
we get to work with a little bit. Bernhard, who did a bunch of faces in the 30s and 40s.
Lucian Bernhard, yeah.
Lucian Bernhard, a big fan of his work.
Any upstarts whose work you're admiring these days? Designers, men or women in the craft?
Yeah, well, James Edmondson is amazing.
Hmm.
He's, you know, I think he's going to go far. I don't know what, you know, he's sort of, I think right now his problem is that he kind of focuses on display faces. So,
Hmm.
and the market for those is more erratic and you can't really count on them as in terms of like if you're marketing fonts.
Right.
But yeah, he's great. Trying to think who else jumps out. You know, Jessica Hish. She's been around for a while now, but I mean, and she's mostly focuses on lettering. But yeah, she's I don't know what she's doing these days. She had a couple of kids, and she just seems a little bit less active. But I know I
She's
still follow her on Instagram, so she's still doing stuff.
she's setting up her own letterpress shop.
Right. Yeah. And
So
I know she's done a few typefaces. She's not really a type designer exactly.
right, right.
I think she's more of a illustrator lettering artist.
Mhm.
But,
Hmm. Cool. Well, we are at 1 o'clock. We can field a few more questions if anyone has them. Otherwise, we will let Mark get on with his day. Anybody got anything else for Mark?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jim.
Uh, uh, I think Matthew Carter once told me that when he's working on new designs, he would often begin with black paper and introduce white or light to it. And I was just curious if you had ever tried that approach as opposed to marks on a white paper.
you know, no, I've, I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, you know, in some ways, you know, you're working with black and white when you're working with type, but maybe just because I've been doing it this way for so long, I always draw in outlines
Mhm.
and think of it that way. And it's kind of like I can, maybe I just have an idea what that's going to do. Um, I also don't like use like calligraphy tools or anything like that to like draw the letters. I've always just drawn the outlines
Mhm.
or brush or whatever. It's just like I'm just drawing shapes,
Hmm.
and that's always how it's works in my head, I guess.
Right. I did admire your experiments with Braille calligraphy that we did when we were in Germany. That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I did do some calligraphy in high school and college, but I never had a steady enough hand for that, or that kind of discipline that you need to get really good at that.
Right. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I think we're good to go. What a pleasure. This was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, thank you guys.
I'll come over afterward, Mark. I'll see you in about 5 minutes
Okay, yeah,
with my mask on, of course.
right.
All right. Stephanie, thank you so much for hosting us. Jim, thanks for being the bouncer. And thanks
My
to
pleasure.
everybody for coming today. Nicely done all around. Nice to see all of your beautiful and handsome faces.